Welcome back. We're in our third message in the series called Practice Makes Perfect. And we're talking about spiritual practices. And not that we ever become perfect, because if you ever played for a sports team, or we know they always make us or do homework, they always make us practice. I don't think anybody achieves perfection, but you certainly can get better at something.
And that's the point.
And I think that's the point. So what are we focusing on today? What's our spiritual practice that we're talking about?
Well, today we're actually going to talk about fasting and abstinence.
Oh, I don't like this one very much at all.
No, I don't think most people do. No, this is when I think the last video came out was about arrest.
Yeah,
and people are like, I think people were like, hey, we're into this.
I
we're
like
into
that
arrest.
one. Yep.
We talk about fasting and abstinence. This means we're not doing something that we might quite often enjoy.
Yeah.
And this becomes a little bit different. However, okay, let's get into this.
But I think it does fall into line with what Jesus said in Matthew 16, where we have to deny ourselves
Absolutely
in order to follow Jesus. And that's what really this is all about. It gives us a chance to focus on God. So
That's right.
Again, these two practices are very similar.
Yep.
And often when we talk about fasting, it has to do with food.
Yes, quite often.
And but abstinence, although I think is the same idea, it just isn't limited to food.
That's right. Like it is abstaining from something to some degree.
Yep.
For a period of time from the satisfaction of what we generally regard as normal or a legitimate desire.
Sure.
So it really does sort of open up kind of what that might be. But again, like we said, quite often, at least more historically in the Bible, it's usually fasting has been more around food. For example, a normal practice in the season of Lent can be fasting, but also it's giving up a personal pleasure for 40 days.
So what would an example of that be?
Just an example of give it up. I know some people will give up sugar.
Yep.
Just something like that, something they really, really like. Or I've known people who've given up coffee.
Or media. Yeah.
Yep, that's another one too. But ultimately, they have the same goal, which is about connection and dependence on God. So what is being given up isn't something that is necessarily bad or harmful. It is saying to ourselves through participation or enactment that God is the better.
Sure.
So that's really what we're getting at here. So let's kind of jump into a little bit about fasting and what that.
Lots in the Bible about fasting.
Lots in the Bible of fasting. When we get to Matthew 4, probably I think one of the most well-known moments of fasting. Jesus is fasting at this time in preparation. He's going right after John the Baptist will baptize him, and before he started the ministry. Matthew 4:2 said he fasted for 40 days and 40 nights.
It's a long time.
And another one that has in several years I've heard a lot about it. I know there's some books written out maybe about 10 years ago.
The Daniel fast.
The Daniel fast, and the idea that happens in the first chapter of Daniel, and him and his friends in the kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar, if I remember correctly.
Babylon,
they only ate vegetables and water.
Sure.
So again, that was a kind of fast. So again, all that had to do around food, but those kind of a little different. One was completely everything, and the other one was they were eating some vegetables.
I've heard some people say they just have bread and water during
That's right.
fast. Yeah.
And that's actually quite common in a lot of Christian history. We hear a lot of different church leaders that's what they would do for a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the point is dependence and connection to God.
Yeah, there was a Nigerian lady who used to attend our church, and she used to say that fasting without praying is just a diet.
Yeah. Well, and that is what we're doing here.
We're taking time to focus on God.
Exactly. And it is about connecting, again, the physical and the spiritual.
Yeah.
Because if we're just fasting to fast, and I'm pretty sure actually even Paul writes something about this in, I want to say Colossians, where, just the abstaining from things, that alone, like that's not the impressive. That's not impressive. That's not the thing we're looking at. It really is the connection to God's side. So yeah, it comes along when we're fasting, abstaining, we're coming alongside in prayer. Using food as an example, food is a source of life. We all need it.
Yep.
When we're in that period of time when we fast or abstain from food, we are saying with our bodies that God is our ultimate source of life.
Sure.
So when Jesus is tempted in the midst of the fast that we just talked about in Matthew 4, in Matthew, his response into temptation from the devil to the devil is but Jesus told him, no, the scriptures say people do not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God.
Mm-hmm.
So when we fast and abstain, we are enacting the idea that God, again, is our ultimate source of life.
Sure.
John Mark Comer talks about this basically is a way that in which we can pray also using our body.
Our bodies. Yeah. And there's what we talked about last time with the rest, is that a lot of these practices do involve a physical component that involves our bodies. And too often I think we separate the spiritual from the physical, and they are very connected.
Well, and I've heard it sometimes they say like it allows us to be more physically present in that moment. And because it is, as much as there's a lot of spiritualness in this, sometimes I think in our tradition we've almost made everything spiritual, which I think there's a lot that it's important, but like there's so much, it's overlapped.
Yeah.
And sometimes we kind of don't look at the importance of the physical side of things in this. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, when it comes to fasting, abstaining from food, when we feel the pull of hunger, it reminds us that our need for God as a source.
Sure.
Now, we're going to move away a little bit from the idea of food and fasting and stuff like that. In our modern age, in the country we live in, obviously food is still very important, so our body need it.
Yep.
But we don't kind of suffer from the same kinds of food insecurities that they would have.
Definitely not. Food is abundant here.
Yeah.
It's available. I mean, there are people who can't afford to buy food.
Economics can be at play for sure.
We're not downplaying that in any way at all. But for the majority of us, food is easily accessible.
That's right. So that's why I really like Skye Jethani suggested in his book, The Divine Commodity, where he talks about doing a digital or a media fast. Because I think we live in kind of this age where kind of attention and time are one of the biggest commodities. Like everything is trying to get your attention and everything is trying to get a little bit of your time.
Sure. And we talked about busyness before as well.
Yes.
That our culture is very busy to the point where we wear busyness as a badge of honor.
Yeah, absolutely. And so much is trying to fight for our attention all the time. I mean, I know in the book, he talked about how many ads we can see in a day. So trying to get our attention with ads to buy this thing or what the next thing. And that book was written, 15 years ago?
It's only
I can't imagine the number now compared to the number of the data that he had back then. So it might be consideration that when we're fasting or abstaining for a period of time, that it's potentially what we're fasting from what's overtaking our attention.
Sure.
And if we're being honest, what tends to overtake our attention ends up forming us.
Yes. And we're telling ourselves and choosing to allow God to form us instead of culture.
And so, that's essentially what we're doing. We're just like, it's when we might have that, that same idea, like that pull of hunger if we're fasting food. Well, that pull of that thing that gets my attention, that thing that I find exciting, that thing, or whatever that is, that same pull to say that use that to look towards God. Mm-hmm. And it kind of, for me, reminds me of, kind of how we can respond to the Our Father, that prayer specifically when it says, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. When God is our source and we are giving our time and attention, fasting is a way that we can do that. Mm-hmm. It's a way he forms us and we kind of live out that prayer of doing his will as it's starting to form.
I like that.
Now, when it comes to fasting, again, I think instead of getting into all this right or this wrong, I think, Jesus does talk about this in the Sermon on the Mount, and he doesn't really sort of talk about fast this way, fast that way. What he focuses on is motives.
Sure.
And that's probably when it comes right down to it, whenever we're going to fast or abstain from whatever, the thing that we may be more concerned about is our motivation in that. So when Jesus talks about it there, he says this in Matthew 6:16, when you fast, don't make it obvious as the hypocrites do, for they try to look miserable and disheveled so people will admire them for their fasting.
Sure.
I tell you the truth. they will get I should actually put this down so poorly on here.
That is the only reward they will get.
That is the only reward that they will get.
Yeah.
So it's important to know that doesn't mean that people can't know that you're fasting or from abstaining everything.
Mm-hmm.
What it means is we aren't doing it to bring glory or attention to ourselves.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's more in our culture. We would call that a humble brag.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it did. And I find that because Jesus is pretty straightforward, so I find that quite amusing. He's saying, "Hey, if you do that, you're going to get the reward, but you're going to a reward, but you're going to miss out on the true reward."
Yeah.
And again, to reiterate thing like we've said probably 3 or 4 times now, it's about connection with God.
Yeah.
So, how have we fasted? Again, we can do this in many ways. The more historic or customary method has been around food, but we've talked about different kind of idea of media. We talked about that a little earlier. But here's the thing: we can go back and you can hear the story that we said Jesus fasted for 40 days and 40 nights. If that's something you want to do, okay, please do it healthily.
And I know a church I used to attend, the pastor was very into 40-day fast, but he had a whole, almost like a paper written out on how to prepare for it.
Exactly.
Because it can do a lot of damage to your body if you don't do it properly. If you just go cold turkey from where you are to 40 days of fasting with no food and just water, it can be very, very,
dangerous.
Through withdrawal. Yeah.
Well, and actually in all the reading that I did kind of preparing for this, I want to say everyone, and some really hit on it, like when it came to this, to make sure you're doing it healthily.
In a healthy way.
Because some people, that's like even a little bit, it's just not healthy, depending if maybe you've suffered from body images and stuff like that, and you don't have a healthy relationship with food.
Yeah.
Be careful. Some of our bodies don't do well with if it's, say, a full out fast, and it's not healthy for you.
I know somebody that can't actually fast more than one meal because they're a little bit hypoglycemic, and they would it really affects their mental state and their ability to function if they miss more than just one meal.
Yeah, so, and I think if that is someone like you, it's okay. Healthy is the point here.
Yeah.
But when it comes to this, like how we fasted, well, one of the ways I've done it, sometimes I've done a meal.
Yep.
I actually had a professor that I had in school in first season. I know he fasted lunches on Wednesdays.
Yep.
So doesn't have to be anything in. I know people that have sort of like they did it they fasted until supper, so 2 meals. There's lots of ways you can do that. I've done fasts like that. But again, the idea is please be healthy. The other thing I've done probably more often is media fast.
Yeah.
I have fasted from watching TV, from movies for periods of time, social media, different things like that. And I do find it really beneficial. But like it doesn't have to be anything huge. It doesn't have to be for forever and always. Like you said, Lent's a 40-day fast, but I mean, it doesn't mean you have to do 40 days. Anytime you do it, it might be for a week. It might be for a day. Whatever that looks like. How about you? How different ways you practice?
A couple things. One, food is one I do regularly. And again, it's usually just one meal. Sometimes I'll do 2. On occasion, I've done a whole day, or from the Jewish fast from sundown to sundown kind of thing.
Yep.
So 24 hours, but really only skipping 2 meals. You still eat dinner early one day and late the next day, but 24 hours fast. So those are ones that I find quite easy for me to do, and it doesn't cause me too much discomfort other than feeling hungry, which is kind of the point.
Yep.
The other one is for me is games. I like to play games, and I'm not a big video gamer, but I like to play word games and things on my computer and on my tablet, and I can while away many an hour doing such things. And so quite often I will take a complete break from games for a period of time, just to help make sure I'm doing the reading that I need to do, and having my quiet time, and doing the prayer, and making those the priority, and not just getting through them so I can play a game.
Yeah, and again, once again, I think it's really important in all of this. Prayer is, it's another spiritual practice that we'll talk about in the near future.
Yeah.
But it's quite often connected with fasting. It's not just stopping the games or stopping time on social media.
Sure.
It's also connecting in prayer.
Yeah.
So again, I think just to as we come to a wrap up here, the why we do it. And again, why is important, because as we talked about, Jesus did talk about motives matter when it comes to this.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we simply do it. We do it to connect to God and to demonstrate and remind ourselves our need for Him.
Need for God, yeah.
We can fast as a response, sometimes to grief,
Sure,
injustice, both personal and societal injustices.
Yep.
Sometimes we're fasting because it's our desire to see God present in the midst of that certain situation.
sure. Other reasons to fast are maybe there's a specific need in our life, or we want to kind of focus on that particular need and bring that before God in a way that shows we're willing to make some sacrifice. And again, we have to be careful there. We can't just automatically guarantee that every time you fast
It's not a formula.
and pray, you're going to get what you want. We have to trust God that He knows what's best for us and will give us. But I do think it is a way for us to bring our attention to God in a way that sometimes helps us see the bigger picture about what we're asking for. And it could be, something that we're hoping for, a health issue or concern. I know recently in our church family, there was a connection to a family where there was some cancer, and many of us took time to pray and fast for those
Right.
people that were going through that.
Yep.
And we were grateful that in both cases that both came through with what the world would call success. So we attribute at least part of that to our prayers and fasting.
Yeah. Another one I actually hear a lot of is just direction. Like if
Yeah.
you're just feeling like you aimless and all that, sometimes we fasting alongside with prayer is God, asking God to help us just get some direction in our life. We're just feeling we're feeling a little aimless, lost, whatever that might even look like.
Yep.
Or there's a big decision coming out and it's just like, I do not know how to handle it.
Yeah.
That's a huge
And
thing
sometimes
to
for
do
me, it is, I know I'm on the right path, but I get discouraged.
that. Yeah.
And I kind of want to just make a point of fasting to remind myself, and
It's a
for
good one.
God to also remind me that I am on the right track, that
Yeah.
doing what He wants me to do.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And again, these are just some of the, kind of a little bit about fasting. Just a vast subject. Many, many books have been written on it. Even reading it was a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah.
But just start small. You don't, like when you hear again, 40 days and 40 nights, you don't have to start there.
Definitely not.
And if that's something you're going to do, please look at some research of how to do that. Even consult a doctor, because again, the whole point in all this is not to be unhealthy in doing this. But if you want to start small. If it's a meal, start with breakfast. Start with lunch.
Yeah.
If it's something, start with just, hey, you notice that your attention can be given a lot to, and again, it's not that this is the bad thing. It's just you notice your attention is given a lot to social media, and you might think, you know what, I'm going to take a day and I'm just going to fast social media. It doesn't need to be a long time. And in that time when you feel that pull to go onto that app on the phone, is your reminder of just to take a few moments to just take a prayer to God. Maybe you just want to connect with Him again. Maybe it's for a health thing. Maybe it's about direction.
Absolutely.
Whatever it might be. Maybe it's just something that you're seeing in the world news, the injustice, and you just want to ask God to be in the midst of that.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever that is, just again, it's okay to start small. Please like and subscribe. We're going to bring some more of these practices to your attention in the next coming weeks. So thank you so much for joining us.